All right, hello everyone. Welcome to another Chef Share edition. Today we're going to be going over integral sauces or pan sauces. So these are sauces that we make in the same pan that we cook our proteins in. We're going to be doing a sauteed airline chicken breast with a sauce chasseur, which is also referred to as a hunter sauce, made from mushrooms, shallots, white wine, and Espanol. We'll also be covering a pan roasted beef strip loin with a green peppercorn sauce as well. And these are all sauces that we cover in our Chef 2302 saucier course, where we go over the fundamentals of sauce making with our students in order to prepare them for the industry. And I'm here with Ninel Garcia, who is in her last semester of the Culinary Arts program. She will be graduating this spring, so we're very proud of her. And we're going to be doing objectives that we cover in our Chef 2302 saucier class in the fall semester. So we're going to start with the chicken with the sauce chasseur. So we start out with, we have our chicken breast here, and this is an airline chicken breast so that it has the skin on, and it also has the Frenched wing bone here that has just the tip of it cut off. And the reason why we do this is, one, for the presentation value of having the wing attached to it, but also we cut off the tip just so any excess blood in the bone will drain out of it. So you don't have any of that residual blood effect in your finished product. So the first thing, since we're going to be sauteing these items and then making the pan in the sauce afterwards, we're going to start with getting our pan hot. Anytime you saute any product, you always start with a cold pan and then get your pan hot before you begin, before you add any oil. And then we have our chicken that's been sitting out here. So what we're doing is we're tempering the meat. You can start with your chicken, taking it directly out of the refrigerator, and that's perfectly fine. However, you do want to take it out maybe 30 minutes before you start cooking in order to dust the chill off the chicken breast and let it start to come to room temperature. And this is because for the chicken to be cooked safely or to be eaten safely, it must reach an internal temperature of 165 degrees. So if we come out of the refrigerator, our chicken's starting anywhere from 32 to 41 degrees, depending on your refrigerator, and we're bringing it from that temperature up to 165. If you take it out maybe a half an hour before you start cooking, you're going to bring it up so it has less of a range to go in order to reach the safe cooking temperature for consumption. And you will get a more juicier finished product from doing that. You don't want to take it out and let it sitting out all day. Just take it out right before you start cooking while you're getting the rest of your ingredients together. So we're going to start with seasoning it. So while our pan is getting hot. So we want to season both sides of it with salt and pepper. And for this case, we're going to be using kosher salt. So you can do kosher salt, you can do sea salt, it's your choice. Typically for meats and proteins, we prefer using a kosher salt because it is a bigger crystal and it'll penetrate better into the protein of your meat, or whether your chicken or your steak, in order to provide more even seasoning. You don't want to use iodized salt. That's mainly just for baking purposes. And that's not going to give you a good seasoning effect for it. But when you go to season, you want to start seasoning high. I can season really close to it like this, and as you can see, all the salt just clumps in one area. You season high and it just starts to fall like rain over top of it, and you get a more even distribution of your salt across your product. And then you just hit it up with a little bit of ground pepper as well. For the chicken, we're using ground white pepper. So all peppercorns, whether they're white peppercorns, black peppercorns, they all come from the same plant. White peppercorns are just harvested or picked earlier, and so they haven't had time, they don't change color or mature. They do have a different flavor to them, but typically most chefs will use white peppercorns because I've used black peppercorns on a product like this. Sometimes they think it might look like there's dirt or dust on the finished product, and that's why they won't use it. When you season the other side, so the top part, you definitely want to season both on and underneath the skin of it. So again, you want to season high, so you get your salt evenly distributed across, and your pepper. But you want to pull your skin back down over top of it and then season the top of it. And the reason why you season underneath the skin is the skin is just fat, so it's a very thick texture over top of it. And if you season the top of this, the salt will not have time to penetrate through the chicken skin into the actual protein of the flesh for it. So we have our pan started here, so it is hot, and we're just going to get a little bit of oil into the bottom of the pan. We're going to let our oil get hot. So we just had, first we had our pan, we're getting hot, now we're letting our oil get hot before we start adding our chicken into it. And just some fundamentals of this. One, when you go to set this into the pan, you don't want to, it's going to be a reaction or natural thing to want to start here and then put it this way. And all that does is have the chicken, the fat in the pan just splashes towards you. So you always want to take it where you start here, tilt it back, set it in the pan and just go against it like that. And then just let it start that way. So we want to start at a higher temperature and we're just letting the skin start to get crisp. Now we're going to be cooking this all the way in the pan. So we want to cook it the majority of the time on the skin side. The skin acts as protection for the chicken breast meat. Chicken breast is very lean, so it will dry out quickly. So you don't want to be cooking it on the bottom side that doesn't have any of the protection from the fat on it in order to produce the juiciest product that you can. So we're starting out here, and after we get it started, we're going to just turn down the heat to a sort of a medium lowish flame, and then let it slowly cook out after that. Okay, so the next part, so Ninel is going to be actually making the pan sauce for this at the end. So we want to do all of this in the same pan, and we'll just go over the ingredients for this first. So we have the chicken with the sauce chasseur. Sauce chasseur means translates roughly to a hunter sauce. And the way this used to go was you'd have like the gentlemen back in the day, they would go out hunting wild game out in the fields. So they'd come back with rabbit or fowl or some kind of game bird. And then they would bring that back and then they would make a pan sauce for that product. And they would use it with, they would have the mushrooms, shallots, they would have the demi-glace sauce for that, white wine, and the fresh herbs. In this case, we're using parsley. But chasseur just means hunter, so it had to do with just a product or a dish that they would make out of the game that they have. So we've translated that into modern cooking times where we typically are going to do it with chicken, and we'll typically still use the same setup with our mushrooms, our shallots, our white wine, and then our demi-glace. And so demi-glace over here, this is a sauce made from beef broth or beef stock. You caramelize mirepoix, you add red wine, you add your beef stock or broth to it, and you reduce it down until you get a thick, rich body with your sauce overall. And the way we're going to go about this process, what Miss Ninel is going to demonstrate for you. So we have our chicken cooking here. When it finishes, we're going to take this out and set it up to rest. And at that point in time, we're going to make our pan sauce. So the first steps will be, we'll drain off any excess fat from the pan. We will add our mushrooms and our shallots. While our mushrooms, get those nicely browned, and add our shallots. At which point in time, we will add our white wine, and we're going to reduce that au sec. Au sec just means dry. Most of our culinary terminology comes from French. That was the first group that codified a lot of the processes and techniques in the culinary arts field. So we cook this until it's au sec or until it's dry, and at which point we're going to add our demi-glace to it, and then reduce that down until we get the sauce consistency that we want, and then we'll plate up our finished dish overall at the end. So at this point, we have our chicken that's here, and we can just check it to see how it's going. As you can see on this side, the skin is starting to get a nice golden brown color, but we still want to let that go farther. So we're going to let that cook the majority of the way on the skin side. Overall, a chicken breast, it'll vary depending on the size, but this one will take roughly about 10 to 12 minutes. And we want to cook this for 8 to 10 minutes on the skin side. And we'll just flip it over at the very end and just gently cook the bottom side, or kiss it on the other side of the pan is typically what we're going to refer to it as. Okay, so we've been cooking our chicken breast for about 10 minutes on the skin side. So we have a nice golden brown skin, and we're just going to flip it over just to kiss the other side. So we take it over. So we have our nice crisp skin, and the crisp skin is important because one, it'll give you two different textures when you are eating the chicken at the end. You'll have the chicken breast itself, which should be moist and tender, and then you'll have the chicken skin itself, which will be nice and crisp. And we want to spend a good amount of time cooking the skin because you want to render as much fat as you can out of it. The skin should be just crisp, but it shouldn't be chewy at all. So we flipped it over just to finish cooking the bottom side of it. And we're going to take it out and we're going to set it up on our tray here with our roasting rack. So we set it on a roasting rack here, and you want to let anything that you cook rest for about 1/3 of the cooking time that you were cooking it for. So in this case, we want to let this rest for about 3 minutes, during which time period Ninel is going to go ahead and start doing the pan sauce. We'll just move this over here. So we have all of our mise en place set up for the sauce. So mise en place just being all of our ingredients, another French culinary term. It translates loosely to everything in its place. So we have our butter, mushrooms, shallots, white wine, espagnole, and our parsley. And we want to lay it out in the order that we're going to use it. And this is how we stay organized with what we're doing. So the first thing Ninel is going to do is she's going to take it and she's going to dump any of the excess fat just off to the side. Which won't be a great deal, but we don't want to mix any of that in. So we have this product at the bottom here called fond, which means base, and we do want to make sure we get all of that in. So the first thing she's going to do is start adding just 1 tap of butter into it, letting that melt down, and at which point she'll start adding her mushrooms to the pan just to start getting them crisp. These are regular button mushrooms that are just sliced. You could use other kinds if you want, if you prefer shiitakes, oyster mushrooms, or a variety mix. It's entirely up to you. And she's going to add about half of that in there just to get a good coating. It is a mushroom sauce, so it's supposed to be an earthy flavored sauce to go with the chicken. She has her mushrooms in there that she's going to start. And even in this case too, you want to season each ingredient as it goes in the pan. And you keep the same principle. So you want to season high. So we want to get an even coating over everything. We'll add some of our white pepper as well. And at this point, we can start to turn up the heat on our pan just to get the mushrooms nice and browned. So we're going to get that cooked around. And so you want to leave all of the fond or all of the product that caramelized in the bottom of the pan. We want all of that in the sauce. That's just excess flavor from the chicken. And we're looking at building as much flavor as we can into our finished product. We could make this sauce like on the side in a pot, but we would miss out on some of the flavor we got from the chicken and all the excess juices from the chicken that caramelized in the bottom of the pan. Okay, so she has the butter going here, and she's going to start adding some of our shallots. You can use onion as well. You just want it to be a small dice into it, and she's going to get that going and letting that saute as well. Again, since we added a new product, we're going to add a little bit of salt to that as well, and a lot of seasoning too. Nothing should taste salty. Salt, all it's doing is drawing out or amplifying the natural flavor of a product. So we're adding that to do that. So you just want to make the mushrooms taste better and increase or enhance the mushroom flavor. What we're technically doing is the salt is removing moisture from a product. If moisture is water, all water does is dilute flavor. So you're amplifying the product, the natural flavor of all the product that you have for that. Okay, so she has her shallots in there, she has her mushrooms, she has a nice golden brown color, and at this point she's going to add the wine to it. We'll turn down the heat a little bit. Go ahead and add all of it into it. And so you're cooking off the alcohol and the wine. What we want to get from the wine is the sweetness, flavor from it. And she's going to take her wooden spoon and just scrape the bottom of the pan. And that's how we're getting that fond or the chicken juices that have caramelized from the chicken off the bottom of the pan. And we're getting that into the rest of the mushroom flavor. And so we're reducing this au sec. Again, a sec just means dry. So we're going to cook the wine down until the pan is dry. There's no wine left into it. It shouldn't taste like wine. That's just using in order to build more flavor into our finished product, into our finished sauce. So we have our chicken that's resting over here while we're finishing out our sauce. And so what happens when we're resting this product, you have the chicken that's in the pan, and you have all the heat that's pushing all the, not the juices or the moisture in the chicken towards the center. It's going away from the heat source. And we take it off and let it sit there. And so the natural juices are relaxing, or the moisture inside the chicken is relaxing and evenly distributing itself back through the chicken. So you do want to rest that before you start cooking it. Anytime you've ever roasted turkeys for Thanksgiving, they always say rest it for quite a while. And you're doing the same thing. If you cut into it right away, you cut into where the moisture is in the middle, and all of that will leach out of your finished product, and you end up with a dry product. Okay, so the wine is au sec, and she's going to add her demi-glace to it, or her espagnole to it. And at this point, our sauce is almost done. We're just going to get this reduced down to the consistency that would coat the back of a spoon, or what's referred to as nappe. You should be able to coat it on the back of a spoon and hold it up, and it should stay stuck to the back of the spoon area. And we'll just get set up for our plating here, since we're almost at the very end. So we'll just finish it with the herbs at the very end. Go ahead and kill the heat. You're good to go there. So we have our chicken that we'll set up here. Typically with this plate, you could do it with any kind of wild rice, vegetables, that will be your choice. But for this purposes, we're going to just sauce over top of this. So we'll hit it with a little bit of our minced parsley at the end and stir it in. And then we'll just take it and then we'll sauce our product. So when you go to sauce a chicken breast or anything, you want to sauce the bottom third of it. So we're going to take it from here and just come down off the chicken breast this way. And the reason why you want to sauce the bottom third of it is when you cook a chicken breast, while you have to cook it to 165 degrees, it's not evenly thick going all the way across. The tail end is going to be thinner and it will be drier than the top part. So we're going to sauce the bottom part, that's going to be the thinnest, to give it a little extra moisture for it. And we also spend all the time making our skin nice and crisp and nice and juicy, so we don't want to cover that up. If we pour sauce all over top of our crispy skin, then all it's going to do is all the work we spent crisping that, rendering out the fat, is all for naught, because we're just going to dump a bunch of sauce on it and it'll end up being chewy anyway. So that is our finished chicken with our chasseur sauce at the very end, and we're going to be moving on to do our steak with our green peppercorn sauce next. Okay, so Ms. Tinel Garcia will be helping me make this integral sauce, which is a pan sauce that's made in the same pan that you cook your protein in. These are all covered in our Chef 2302 Saucier class, where we cover and execute the fundamentals of sauce making in order to prepare our students for when they leave our program and go out into the culinary world. So we're going to be making a pan roasted beef strip loin. So this is a baseball cut. So as opposed to a long thinner slice that you normally see, we split a strip loin in half and then we cut our square or rectangular shape steaks out of that. So we're going to have that, and we're going to be serving it with a green peppercorn sauce. So the first thing we're going to do is get our steak started. So we'll get our saute pan hot. Anytime you're going to saute anything, always start with your pan, get it hot first before you add your oil into it. But we'll want to get our steak seasoned. So our steak has been sitting out for about 30 minutes. We do want to temper our protein before we start the cooking process. We do want it to come to closer to a room temperature, just because for a steak, and we're going to do this medium rare because that's what I prefer my steaks to be. So we want to cook this to about 120 to 125 degrees. If we come straight from our refrigerator, straight from our cooler, the steak is going to be around anywhere from 35 to 40 degrees, and it has a longer range in order to get up to our desired internal cooking temperature. If we bring it out, let it come to room temperature, it has less of a range to go. And all that really means is the outside of our steak will not be overdone by the time we reach our internal temperature. So the first part of this is we want to get our steak seasoned. So we're using a kosher salt. Kosher salt, the crystals on it are bigger. It is the only rock that we eat. And we want to season it from like a higher distance in order to let the salt evenly distribute over top of the steak. As you can see, we could salt it directly like this, but our stock clumps. We'll end up having uneven seasoning. We're going to have parts that are going to be salty and parts that are not. So we want to do it from a higher temperature. And we're going to use black peppercorns for this dish. So when we did a chicken earlier, or if you're doing fish, a lot of people will use ground white pepper, mainly just because if you're using black pepper, it can show up. It might look like dirt or dust in the dish. Since our protein, our beef, is a darker color, we do want to use the black peppercorns on that. So we want to make sure we get our seasoning evenly distributed. So we'll do our salt, we'll season it high, get our even distribution over it, and so get our cracked black pepper over top of it as well. So our pan is hot, it's starting to smoke, which is good. We can turn it down a little bit, and we'll add our oil next. So you want to have your pan hot first, then your oil. If you get your pan and your oil, you heat them up at the same time, you're not creating layers. So what you want is your pan to get hot, and then you add your oil, and so then they're separated. If you get your pan and your oil together, they heat up at the same time, then you add your product, your protein, in this case our steak, then it starts to stick to the bottom of the pan. you won't have the separation between the pan and the oil. So we go to set this in. We want to have our oil distributed throughout, and you want to tilt the pan so the oil kind of moves away from you. So when you add this to it, if you have any splashage, it's going to splash in the other direction. So our pan is hot, so we're going to just turn it down a little bit. And we want to get a nice caramelization on the one side of the steak, and then we're going to flip it over to cook the other side of the steak. So this is different than when we cook our chicken with our chicken breast. Our chicken breast is a very lean protein. We cooked it on the skin side throughout the majority of the cooking process in order to protect the chicken protein from drying out. When we have our steak, it has marbling throughout it. So the fat in the marbling is what helps keep our product moist. So we want to get even cooking on all sides in order to reach an even internal temperature. So we're going for about 120 degrees. We want to do it like a nice medium rare. So we don't need to cook it all the way through like we do a chicken breast. So the sauteing and the pan roasting process is slightly different throughout this. So when we get into our sauce making, while we're getting our steak going, we want to have all of our mise en place lined up. So mise en place is a French term. It means everything in its place. And you want to have all your ingredients laid out before you begin. If we started our steak, then we tried to get everything together, we lose track of this, we start to burn our product, and we don't end up with a good finished product in the end. So when this finishes, we'll take this out of the pan to rest, and we'll add our butter first, followed by our shallots, and then followed by our green peppercorns here. So all peppercorns, whether they're green, white, black, all do come from the same plant. Green peppercorns are picked right when the peppercorn, the berry is ready, right when it forms. White peppercorns are left on a little bit longer. Black peppercorns are left on longer than that. So they do have different flavor profiles. The green peppercorns are then typically stored in a brine in order to preserve them for a longer period of time. And they do have a spicier flavor or spicier feel to your finished product. So after that, we're going to add our cognac. So we're going to flambe in the pan, cook off the alcohol, followed by our port wine, followed by our Espagnole, followed by our heavy cream, and then finally we'll add a little bit of red wine vinegar and our chopped parsley to our finished sauce. So we have our steak here. We'll take it and we're going to flip it over. We have our nice caramelization on this side where we're getting our product together. And when we get our nice caramelization on the other side, then we'll remove our steak to rest it before we make our pan sauce. So we want to rest it for about 1/3 of the cooking time. For a steak this size, it'll probably take 8 to 10 minutes for us to cook it to a nice medium rare color. So we'll need to rest it for about 3 minutes before we plate it up. And the purpose of that is, when the steaks in the pan right now, our heat source is at the bottom. That's pushing all of the juices inside the steak towards the center. It's just pushing away from the heat. And it's constricting everything inside the center of your protein. We want to let it rest so all of the juices inside the steak will relax out and be evenly distributed throughout our finished product. That's what helps us maintain a juicier finished product for our steak in the end. So during that time period is what we'll use. We'll rest our steak and then we'll make our pan sauce in order to be efficient with all of our time. Okay, so we finished pan roasting our steak. So we have our nice caramelization on both sides. And then we did just kiss it on the outsides as well. And we'll set it here to rest, which we want to do we want to give it a good 3 to 4 minutes to rest in order for the juices to distribute throughout it. So in the meantime, Misty Nell Garcia is going to start making our green peppercorn sauce for it. So we have our pan that's hot here. She's going to drain off any of the excess fat. And so we do want to keep all of any of the caramelization that occurred during the cooking process in the bottom of the pan. That's called fond, which translates to base, and that's just all extra flavor, so we don't want to waste any of that. We want to build flavor throughout our whole sauce making process. So you can start first adding our butter to it. Let's turn it down just a little bit. So we get that melted down, and then she's going to start adding the shallots into it next. So we get our shallots added into our pan. And we're going to get that sweated out. So we want to start to extract the flavor from the shallots. Again, each step of the way, every time we add an ingredient, we do want to season. So add a little bit of salt, a little bit of pepper, making sure that we always season high with our product. She's have her wooden spoon too in order to get that extra fond off the bottom of the pan. You do want to use a wooden spoon for this process. If you use a metal spoon, you could end up scraping off pieces of your cast iron pan or your stainless steel pan off into your finished product, which is not going to be very good in the end. So next she'll add our green peppercorns to it. So again, green peppercorns, they're from the exact same plant as a white peppercorn or black peppercorn. They're just picked right when the berry forms. So they're young peppercorns. They do have a little bit of a spicier flavor to them overall. We get that sauteed into our mix, and she'll start adding our cognac next. And so this will flambe. And so we do want to get that effect too, so we do want it to cook off with that. So she'll pour it into the pan. And we'll just let that cook off. And we're cooking that down a sec before we start adding our port wine. And the cognac is just adding a little bit of like smoky flavor to it. That's why we want to flambe it off, just to enhance that smoky aspect to it. So she's going to add our port wine into it. Port wine is a sweeter wine. It's a fortified wine. So we're getting a lot more sweetness to it. So we have our green peppercorns, which add a little bit of spiciness to it. We have the smokiness from our cognac, and now we're getting some sweetness from our port wine. So we're getting that product in there before we start to, and we're going to reduce that down a sec. So a sec means dry. It's a French culinary term. So you want to cook that down until there's none of the liquid left in the pan. And all of that's been absorbed into our green peppercorns and into our shallots. So that's just going to enhance the flavor and just build it throughout that. So it is almost there throughout it, and at which point we're going to add our Espagnole sauce into it. So our Espagnole sauce is a fortified beef stock or veal stock. You caramelize mirepoix. You add your stock, reduce that down until you get a much thicker, richer body sauce. So she's added that into it, so we'll mix that into it. And we're working towards our finished sauce. So we have our integral sauce here. We cooked our steak in the pan. We've added butter. We've added our shallots. So we're just building flavor each step of the way. So we've added our cognac, flambéed that off. We've added our port wine to get our sweetness. Now we've added our Espagnole to give the sauce more body, more texture to it. So next up, she's going to add the heavy cream. This will give the sauce some extra richness to it as well. Since it does have a lot of flavors going on, the heavy cream helps to absorb some of the richness and some of the robustness of the flavor, and it helps give it a smoother feel in the very end. Just getting that stirred into it. And at this point, we're looking just to reduce it to like a nappe texture. So we want it to be to the point where it will just evenly coat the back of a spoon. So you could take any kind of spoon, hold it up, and it will stay coated on the back of the spoon overall. So she has like a nice sauce going on, a nice color going. And at the very end here, so we're going to go ahead and get ready to cut our steak. So we have our parsley that we'll mix in at the end, and maybe a little bit of red wine vinegar just to add some balance. So our steak has been resting, so we'll set it up here. And we'll finish this with just a little bit of chopped parsley and just a little bit of the red wine vinegar. Not a lot. We have a good finished body on it, so we're going to go ahead and cut our steak in half. You don't have to cut your steak in half, it's just more for presentation purposes. And you could cut this on an angle on a bias. And then we'll take our finished sauce and we'll just spoon it over just 1/3 of the side. So we'll give it a final stir, take it, and then we'll just cover down 1/3 of our finished steak here. Still making sure that we keep the rest of our steak open so we can see that our moisture is distributed evenly throughout it. We have a nice color going all the way across. That's just due to the resting process that we did. And then we just sauce with our green peppercorn sauce at the very end. We hope you enjoyed watching this edition of Chef Share, where we covered integral sauces with our sauteed airline chicken breast with the sauce chasseur, and our pan roasting beef strip loin with our green peppercorn sauce. We hope to see you again here soon, and you can always catch any of our videos on the EPCC YouTube channel.